All right. Well, hello, everyone. So nice to see you all. Thank you for having me today. So my name is Fiona Tracy, and I'm with Western Washington University's admissions office. And tonight, I'm really just going to talk about a program called WUE, which is the Western Undergraduate Exchange, which, in my opinion, is one of the most underutilized tuition saving tools out there for students in the West. So in the next 30 minutes or so, my goal is for all of you to gain a better understanding of what WUI is, whether it applies to you and kind of what that entails. I will leave some time for questions at the end, but if there are any questions as I go out throughout, you're welcome to shout those out or put those in the chat as well. So to start us off talking about what WUI is. So WUI at its core is going to be a tuition savings program. It is run by an organization called WISH, which is the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, which is basically going to be a nonprofit that helps Western states collaborate on educational policy. Simple version is that if you're a resident of one of the 16 participating Western states or territories, you might be eligible to attend an out-of-state public college in another WUE state for no more than 150% of that school's in-state tuition rate. So that's the cap, 150% of the in-state tuition rate. To put this in perspective a little bit, most out-of-state tuition is going to be anywhere from 200 to 300% of in-state tuition. So WUE can really represent that significant discount. And right now, there are over 160 participating colleges and universities across the West that are enrolled in this program. Now, I kind of want to talk about which states and territories participate in WUE. So as you can see on this map here, you'll see it covers most of the Western US, Alaska, Arizona, California, of course, Colorado, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, and so forth. One thing that I do just want to make clear too is that even just because your home state, California, is on this list, it does not mean that you're automatically getting that WUE everywhere. So the key rule is that you have to be attending a school in a different WUE state than the one that you live in. So for any of you folks living in California, you won't be eligible to receive WUE at a California school. You'll be having to attend, let's say, a WUE school in Washington. Now, kind of go into who qualifies for WUE. So there are 3 requirements to qualify for WUE, and all 3 of them really need to be true. First is that you have to be enrolling out of state from your home state. So your legal state of residency has to be different from the state where the school you're looking at is located. Second is that the school has to be a public college or university, to either 2-year or 4-year. So WUE is a program for public state-funded institutions. So private schools, even ones located in those WUE states, are not part of this program. And then third one is that not every public school in a WUE state participates, and that is something to really keep an eye out for. Schools individually opt into this program, so even if a school is public and located in a WUE state, you still need to verify that it's actually opted in. And even within a school that participates, it's important to note that not every major is going to qualify. Some schools restrict WUE to specific programs, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment too. And then this slide, it just has a quote that I really love from a former Western student that says, WUE gave me the chance to pick where I wanted to go to college, made it easier for me to move to a different state without the usual money worries that come with an out-of-state tuition. So this is kind of why WUE. Why does this matter? Because the savings can really be substantial for students and families. For many students, WUE makes attending a school in another Western state more affordable than it otherwise would be. It sometimes can bring the cost closer to what you'd pay for an in-state school. And beyond this financial angle, WUE also opens up a wider range of schools for students to really consider. A school that might seem out of reach financially can become much more viable once WUE is factored in. And for families who are comparing multiple offers, WUE gives you a really meaningful way to compare apples to apples across these different states. Now I kind of want to break down how WUE actually works. So like I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, WUE is going to be run through the organization WISH. So kind of breaking down part of WUE, what is through WISH and what is through those individual schools. So WISH is the organization that runs WUE, and that sets the overall framework. They establish that 150% tuition cap. They also maintain the list of participating states. They approve which schools can be in the program, and they publish the school directory online at their website. But the key thing is that WISH does not control how these individual schools award WUE. So each participating school makes its own decisions. They decide which majors are eligible, how many students apply, which class years qualify, what are the GPA requirements, are there renewal requirements, and how many WUE awards they give out each year. So this is why two schools that both participate in WUE can have very different policies. The program is consistent in that 150% cap, but it's not uniform in its application. That's why you always need to go directly to each school's website to understand what WUE looks like for that institution. Now, this next slide is just to give you a sense of how much these policies can really vary. So I've put together some sample comparisons of a handful of schools. For example, Western Washington University, where I work, offers WUE for all undergraduate majors. So there's also no separate application. So when students apply to our university, we consider them for this scholarship based on their cumulative unweighted GPA. And for a lot of our students, that's going to be a 3.5 unweighted GPA or higher for eligibility. Also, it is renewable for up to 4 years as long as students maintain enrolled at the university and maintain good academic standing. But if we take a look at another school like Oregon State University, WUE there is limited to select programs and also goes through an annual review for renewal. Colorado State also restricts it to selective programs. So takeaway here is really do not assume the programs or policies for those WUE schools. Every school that is on your list that participates in the WUE should be researched individually. The official directory on the WISH website is going to be a great tool. If you take anything away from this presentation today, it's going to be looking at that WICHE website. Again, that is WICHE. You can just do wiche.edu. And that is going to be the best resource to really filter those schools that are eligible for WUE and then go directly towards those websites and see how they utilize it. All right, and then next, I kind of want to talk about stacking WUE with other scholarships. So one of the most common questions I think students have is, can WUE be combined with merit scholarships? And the answer is, it depends on the school. Some schools treat WUE as a base tuition rate, and then they'll apply merit scholarships on top of that. So you would get the WUE rate and any merit award that would further reduce your cost. Those are what I like to call stacking schools. And they can be really powerful for students who are eligible to earn both those merit awards and that WUE rate. Other schools, on the other hand, can treat it differently. They might give you whichever benefit is going to be more advantageous for you, or the merit award might replace the WUE rather than stack on top of it. I would say that most of the schools that I'm seeing who participate in the WUE are going to be those non-stacking schools. So it's really important to check and see what that is offered at that school. You can really ask that question directly to the admissions office when you're comparing those award letters. or you're researching, you can just ask them, does WUE stack with your institutional merit scholarships? It's a very simple question, but that'll give you a lot of input when you're looking at your cost comparison for colleges. And then just kind of diving into how Western Washington University awards WUE. I know I briefly touched upon this, but just want to go a little bit more in depth. So giving you an example of the institution that I work for. At Western, any WUE state resident that is applying as a first year or transfer student is eligible. There is no separate application and it's automatically considered an admission. So, and this also applies to all undergraduate majors, which, as we discussed, is not the case everywhere. And then this cost example on the right, I think is really important because when we're talking about this 150% cap, it's really nice to see those actual numbers and the estimated savings. So here's what the numbers look like for 2025 to 2026. Our in-state tuition is about $8,500, and our WUE rate, which is capped of 150% of that in-state rate, comes out to about $12,800. And then that full out-of-state rate would be $27,000. So by getting WUE, an out-of-state student saves roughly $14,900 per year compared to the standard out-of-state rate. And over 4 years, that's nearly $60,000 in savings. And the WUE rate, like I mentioned, is good for all 4 years as long as the student stays enrolled in the college and remains in good academic standing. So they actually don't need to keep that 3.5 GPA throughout their entire college. They just need to remain in good academic standing. And then this next slide is just going to be that step-by-step process for applying for WUE. So how do you actually go about using WUE? So here's the process in 5 steps. First, you're going to start by researching schools which participate. Again, the best place to do this is going to be on the website that I have in this PowerPoint slide. You can just visit wiche.edu and it'll have a lot of great resources there. They also have a searchable directory where you can filter by state, school type, and major. That's going to be really your starting point when looking at WUE schools. And then once you have that list of schools, you want to confirm that your intended major is WUE eligible at each one. And remember that some schools do restrict WUE to specific programs. So this step really matters. And then next, you're going to apply to the school. At most schools, WUE is automatically considered when you apply as an out-of-state student. A few may ask you to express interest, but make sure you're checking each school's admissions page and reaching out to the admissions department so that you make sure you're not missing any steps. And then when you are comparing those offers, use that total cost of attendance, not just tuition. Make sure you're factoring in any housing fees and any aid that you've received or will probably receive, and make sure you're looking at that full picture across the schools. And then finally, when that award level letter comes in, make sure you're looking for WUE in the offer and then call that financial aid office to confirm how it interacts with any merit scholarships. All right, well, that brings us to the end of my presentation. I want to thank you all so much for your time tonight, and I hope this was able to help give a solid foundation for thinking about WUE as part of the college planning process. The 3 resources that I really want all of you to walk away with, again, is going to be that wiche.edu. That is going to be really the great place to start off looking at WUE schools. And then the next one is going to be if you are interested in Western Washington University, we are a WUE school. I did go over kind of how that process looks like for us, but if you are interested in learning more about the institution, definitely look at our admissions page and check out our website. And then lastly, of course, just financial aid information, as that's always important to help out in addition to those WUE. And again, I know some of you joined a little bit later. But my name is Fiona Tracy, and I am an admissions counselor at Western Washington University. And I will now open it up if there's any questions in the room, and I'm going to stop sharing. I see a question in the chat. What happens when a student enters when they're WUE eligible, but maybe their WUE eligibility ends during the student's attendance? Just does the student still pay the WUE rate for the remainder of the years? So that is a great question. And what I'm kind of getting from this question is maybe if, let's say, for some schools for that renewal period, or maybe for some schools if they're gaining residency in that state. Um, so at least for my institution, students remain WUE eligible as long as they're in good academic standing. And then they are made still a student at the university. So they're going to continue to pay that WUE rate for all 4 years as long as they keep good academic standing and they maintain being a student. For other schools, I would definitely recommend checking out what their policies are. For some of them, if you do need to renew that WUE scholarship, it would be important to look and see if they require a certain GPA or anything, and what those requirements are. And I hope that answered the question. If it didn't, please feel free to put a follow-up in the chat as well. And I'll stick around for a few more minutes if there's any questions at all. But if any of you, if you have any of you have any questions, you feel free to unmute and ask or type in the chat. Otherwise, it's been really nice chatting with you all today, and I hope that you gained some information about the WUE process. Yeah, great question in the chat. How can you find out if a specific major is WUE approved? So the best way to do that is going to be reaching out directly to the school. So some of those schools do have selected programs that might be eligible or not eligible. Well, some schools, like the one that I work for, it is not major restrictive. So it's really important to just reach out directly to that school. And let's say you're interested in biology, you want them to say, is the biology program WUE eligible? So making sure that that is one of the steps you take when you're looking at these WUE schools. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming today. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. I'll just stick around for a couple more minutes if there's any last minute questions. Yeah, thank you.
This is Jacob Ladin from the Los Altos High School Counseling Department. Making sure everyone hears the announcement that there is also a final, I believe, session around student voices that comes up in a few minutes. So if you want to move on to that, that's great. Also, I was made very clear by Ms. Duran that if there's any other questions that come up after the fact, something pops up in the next day or two, please go ahead and message that to the College Career Center, and we'll go ahead and then connect that with the resources necessary to get you those answers. So we just want to make sure, there's other ways to follow up with us after tonight. So just thank you all for the time. I know that it's important as we're running around doing errands and whatnot in the evenings to have this time and get this college information. So on behalf of the high school, just thank you so much for your time. Everyone have a great night, and please forward us any other questions later on if you need them. Thank you.